Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Courage Conversation Show. I'm your host, Ashley Easter. I'm the founder and executive director of Courage 365, and we have a great show planned for you tonight. We're going to be interviewing Danielle Massi. She is somebody that I've been bumping into in the online space for a couple years now. She is a therapist and does a lot with shadow work, which is going to be our topic for tonight. I just so admire her work, and I can't wait to let you get to know her a little bit. So let me go ahead before we bring her on the show and read her bio because it's pretty impressive. So Danielle Massi has an MSLMFT, is a master in shadow work and a best-selling author. She's a motivational speaker and CEO of the Wellness Collective, a holistic healing space in Philadelphia. Her signature shadow work program is called the Create Your Light Academy and continues to help thousands of spiritual women unearth, remove, and heal unconscious blocks that are causing disconnection between their mind, body, and energy. Danielle is the founder of the Self-ish Philly Conference, a self-care conference where hundreds of women gather annually to indulge in a day of expansion and growth. She's also the creator of the Shadow Seekers certification course that teaches spiritual leaders to become trauma-informed, certified shadow workers. Danielle has written for and been featured in the New York Magazine, The Cut, Shape Magazine, The Huffington Post, and BuzzFeed, and is a frequent guest on major news outlets and high-ranking podcasts. She is the creator of the Shadow Seekers Journal, the most highly sought-after shadow work journal on the market, and Danielle has a new book releasing 9/20 of this year with Union Square Publishing titled Shadow Work. So we're going to have an amazing conversation. We're going to be talking all about shadow work, what that is, how you can do that work for your own healing. But before we bring Danielle onto the show, I am going to leave you for just a few moments so you can hear from these messages.
Anxiousness can strike at any time, while driving a car, in the middle of the night, when giving a work presentation, or in a crowded place. Introducing Calmigo, a smart calming device that learns your personal breathing patterns and adapts to you for immediate relief in just 3 minutes. It quiets your senses through breathing regulation, multisensory stimulation, and calming scents. Don't stress another moment. Click the Learn More button and start using Calmigo today.
Talk about it. I was told not to talk about it.
So I'm here to talk about it.
Because I can't stay quiet.
I was able to break my silence.
Because of those who refuse to stay quiet.
I am a businesswoman.
Activist.
Survivor.
Survivor. Survivor.
Waking up every day in fear, living in a constant cycle of self-doubt and anxiety. We at Courage 365 know that this is what it's like for many survivors of abuse. The abuse may be over, but the healing journey has just begun. After getting professional support, the next most important step is finding a supportive community. And that's why we've created Courage Clubs. Courage Clubs are free online peer support groups created by survivors for survivors. Courage Clubs are for adults who have survived abuse and wish to build supportive community with other survivors. Each month, we discuss a new topic with helpful tools and resources for your healing journey. We can't promise your healing journey will be easy, but we can promise you don't have to do it alone. Hey Danielle, thank you so much for coming on the Courage Conversation Show. How are you?
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm good. How are you?
I am doing great. I've been looking forward to this and I can't wait to dive in. When I knew you wanted to talk about shadow work, I thought this was perfect. It's sort of a buzzword going around social media these days, but I think when we really get into what shadow work is, it's going to be so relevant to the survivors in our community. So,
Oh,
cannot wait to get
absolutely. And
started.
I think shadow work is so important for trauma. And just like you said, it is something that's really popular on social media right now. So most people are seeing it, but they have no idea what it is.
Yes, yes. So that's kind of my first question for you. For somebody who's not familiar with the term shadow work, what is shadow work and how do people do shadow work?
Yeah, so shadow work is something that was coined in 1863 by Carl Jung, who was a famous Swiss psychiatrist. He worked closely with Freud. And with Carl Jung's definition of the shadow, he believed that it was analogous to the unconscious mind, which basically just means everything that you are repressing, everything that's buried so down in your psyche that you can't actually unearth it yourself very easily. So when we have trauma, when we have heartache, when we have moments that feel heavy, the body doesn't always know what to do with them. And so they get pushed down into that unconscious space, into the shadow. So shadow work is the process of going into the unconscious mind to relive those experiences on purpose with intention in a way that's very safe, where we're taking care of your body, your emotions, and your energy as you do that, so we can heal from them completely.
Wow. So it's really like this unearthing of the things that are holding us back and healing through those things so they're no longer affecting our life. Is that right?
Exactly. It's an excavation of everything that you are, because I think we're so run by the idea that we are a certain type of person. Like I hear people all the time describe themselves in specific ways, like, well, I'm an introvert, or I'm a manifesting generator, or a Taurus, or whatever it is that people want to define themselves as. And while those things are helpful in some ways because they help us make sense of our world, it's actually our unconscious minds that make us who we are, our earliest experiences, the things that are buried deep down there, because they change the lens that you see the world through. They make sure that you only pay attention to certain things or that you're triggered by other things. It shapes your personality. So the unconscious mind is the biggest piece of who you are.
Right. And you're using the word unconscious mind, and I've heard unconscious mind and subconscious mind. Sometimes they're used interchangeably. Sometimes I've heard people distinguish the two. For you, are those the same things or are they different?
They're different. So the definition from the psychological association between them is, there's actually three. So let's talk about all three. There's the conscious mind, which is
Yep.
everything that you're fully aware of. So people listening to the podcast now know that they're listening to the podcast. Maybe they're fully aware of what they did in the 5 minutes leading up to that, or what they ate for breakfast this morning. The subconscious is what's just below the surface. It's a little bit muddier because it's the stuff that tends to be a bit more on autopilot. So this is stuff like waking up in the morning and scrolling through your phone without fully being aware that you're doing it. It's an automatic behavior, it's a habit, it's something that you do all the time. When we go into, say, a therapy office and we talk about the traumas that we've incurred, we're almost always talking about stuff from the subconscious because you can still remember it. You can access it with just a little bit of digging. It's not hard to reach. Whereas the unconscious is very hard to reach. And so these are things that you're not remembering whatsoever. To get to that level, you need to be able to unlock the door to the unconscious mind, which almost always happens through deep meditation or hypnosis. And those are the only ways that you can get to it. So that's the big difference. How accessible is it? How sorted is it within your brain?
Fascinating. Thank you for that. That's really helpful.
Of course.
So, as you're talking about shadow work, for some people listening, it might sound a little bit scary. And
Oh,
so,
totally.
before we kind of dive into how somebody could do shadow work, if they want to even try it, what are some of the benefits of shadow work, especially for people who've experienced some sort of abuse or trauma?
So let me start off by saying that I understand that shadow work sounds scary. Trust me. I'm giggling about it because so I'm going to show you guys the cover of the book. This is the cover of Shadow Work, my new book that's coming out in September. And it is very purposefully purple and pink and gold in color. It's supposed to look friendly. And it's because shadow work sounds scary. And a whole team of marketers at Barnes and Noble figured that out and figured this is the best way to get it in people's hands. Because my idea was to have it be a little bit darker, because in my opinion, shadow work is a little bit dark. It references the light because you need light to form a shadow, but it's heavy, but it's not something to be afraid of. And the reason being is that all the stuff that's repressed within your shadow is stuff that's weighing you down. So, in my opinion, it's heavier to hold on to those things because then they start to filter into the rest of your life. They impact the people that you are around because you'll be triggered by them often. It changes how susceptible you are to abuse by partners, because if you believe that that's normal because of your unconscious mind, you're more likely to engage in relationships that will abuse you further. It changes how you feel physically every day, and it could even make you sick. Autoimmune diseases are caused by stress. That's the number one cause of autoimmune illness, besides the genetic factors that go into it that give you a predisposition for it. Shadow in itself can be harmful if you hold it there. To me, that's much scarier than dealing with it. It'll always be scarier than dealing with it. And when we do shadow work, when we pull these heavy memories up, we work so intentionally to keep your body really calm in the process, to make sure that your breathing is regulated, that your heart rate is slow, that you're not experiencing brain fog and you're not switching into that fight or flight space. And so it almost makes it like you're experiencing the trauma from a third person perspective, even though you're not. It just creates a little bit of distance so that you can re experience something and not have it take such a toll on your body. So, for example, I'm a cancer survivor. I had cancer about 5 years ago. And right after my cancer battle, I had very severe PTSD. I couldn't be around certain things, like something as small and insignificant as a butter knife would remind my body of surgery, which I wasn't awake for. I was unconscious, but my body didn't forget. And so a butter knife, watching a butter knife slice through a stick of butter would make me want to throw up. It would send chills down my body. I'd get brain fog. I'd start to sweat. And I couldn't figure out that connection until I did shadow work. Now, my cancer almost feels like it happened to someone else because I've been able to retrain my body, my brain, my energy, my emotions to understand that distance from it. So it doesn't have a hold on me anymore. Now I can talk about it very comfortably, like it's something that happened to someone else, even though it was me and it wasn't that long ago. So shadow work is not scary. It actually will make you feel really good once you go through it. And even during it, believe it or not, it's very cathartic.
Wow, wow. So a couple things that popped my mind with that is it sounds like a lot of shadow work is kind of removing the emotion around what happened. It's not about forgetting what happened, but more removing your strong, intense, um, triggered feelings, emotions around that memory. So it's not something that is overwhelming your everyday. It also reminds me of the thought process behind EMDR therapy, where they're bringing up the emotions and or bringing up the memories of the trauma, but also doing some body work in so you can not forget it, because it's important for us to learn lessons from things. It's important for us to not have amnesia because that can be unhealthy, but to be able to see something and not have a strong body reaction that really feels uncomfortable and scary in our life. So this sounds really valuable and interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, that's exactly right too. I love EMDR as a practice. At my holistic healing center, we have a therapist who specializes in EMDR. The difference between EMDR and something like shadow work is that EMDR focuses on the subconscious mind. So it's
Mm,
only traumas that you can recall on your own. Sometimes, occasionally, I've had people who will do shadow work with EMDR, where they'll do the whole process of shadow work to bring up unconscious memories. And then they'll do an EMDR session around it to really make sure that it's gone. It's a bit redundant because they both do the same thing, but if it's a big trauma, if it's something that's really, really hard to release and it makes you feel comfortable, you can absolutely pair the practices. The
Wow.
reason why both are effective is because there's a loop that operates within all of us called the subconscious feedback loop. And that subconscious feedback loop has four parts. It's your experiences, the chemical reactions in your brain, which basically are emotions. It's the physical reactions that occur because of those. And then the thoughts that actually come up from your gut through the enteric nervous system. Because
Mm,
all of your thoughts come from your gut, even though we think that thinking in our heads, we're not. So that loop that occurs is really seamless. You have an experience, it triggers certain chemicals to release based on how you felt about it last time. That creates a physical response in the body because those chemicals are just messengers. They're telling the body, we need to panic, we need to freak out right now. So blood needs to start pumping. Adrenaline and cortisol need to start moving very quickly through. We need to get ready to run or to freeze in this moment. And then the thought comes up to reinforce that reaction to go, okay, yes, this was the right response. Let's do that again next time. With shadow work or with EMDR, the point is to interrupt that subconscious feedback loop.
mm,
At any one of those 4 points, if we can alter it and change it, it can't exist in the same way within our bodies anymore. It'll change it so that the next time there's a trigger that presents itself, the experience, your body's not going to immediately jump into the normal response because now it's been changed. It'll jump into the new response, which maybe is feelings of detachment, or maybe it's feelings of joy and understanding that this brought you a really good lesson and you've grown so much from it. And that changes the way that your body responds. Your breathing remains really even and calm. Your body and your brain stay within coherence of each other. And the
mm,
message that comes back up is, I'm grateful for this experience. I'm
mm,
grateful that this happened to me, which is what happens to me with my cancer triggers now. They're
mm.
not really triggers anymore. So
Got
that's the very high level science piece of it and
mm.
why both practices work really well.
Huh, that's so interesting. Yeah, yeah. And even if somebody doesn't come to a place where they're grateful for the experience, because I don't think I'll
You
ever be
don't have
grateful
to.
for the things that happen
No,
to me,
you
but
absolutely do not have to be
um
grateful. I'm not grateful for every experience that happened to me, for sure.
but I do know that when I can separate some of the emotions from the experiences, I can look back and say, wow, you know what? At that time, I wasn't able to follow my intuition because of this, this, and this, but my intuition was speaking. And so I know I can trust it in the future. Or, you know, I really realized that something felt off. And even if in that moment I couldn't do something about it, now moving forward, I can know that I can trust myself that when I have that feeling, um, I don't have to, just kind of brush my feelings aside. I can really trust that. And so that's really cool that that separation of the intense triggering emotions so that you can look back at things from a completely different lens without feeling all that heaviness. It's really helpful.
Yeah, I know you
So,
work so much with intuition, and I bet
mm,
that you find, I would assume, because I know that I found this for me, the more distance you can create from it emotionally, the easier it is to really hear the intuition, which is why
yeah.
even though you feel it during the trauma, we
Mhm.
disregard it. We push it
Right.
aside.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Definitely for sure. Because intuition, when it speaks, you may have emotions about what it said, but it doesn't speak with emotion. It's
That's
very
right.
calm, cool, and emotionless. And when we can remove, like you said, the emotions from the equation, it's easier to understand its voice. Those emotions can get really loud sometimes, and
Oh,
so that'll work.
absolutely.
Sounds like a really good option for people to look into with kind of calming that sea of emotions.
Hey, this is Ashley Easter, and I'm interrupting this interview to tell you something really exciting that Courage 365 is now offering for our community. One of our values at Courage 365 is to help survivors live with courage every day. And one way we're doing that is by sending out morning inspirational texts written by survivors for survivors in the Courage 365 community. All you have to do is text the word courage to the number on the screen, and you'll be automatically added to the list.
So you're a shadow work practitioner. But if somebody is like, you know what, I kind of just want to dip my toes in this, how might they be able to look into shadow work for themselves at home and maybe start practicing a little bit of that for themselves?
This is such an important part of the work that I do, and the reason why I wanted to write the book in the first place, because I feel like the unconscious is hard to get to if you don't know how. And
Mm.
once you figure out how, it's actually quite easy. So, a few things that people can start to do on their own. The first is to start to meditate. And people fight me on this constantly, especially in social media like TikTok. Like, I can't meditate, my brain won't turn off, I fall asleep when I try. Those are all trauma responses. That means you should be meditating. And
Mm.
let's change up the definition of what meditation is. Most people think meditation is quieting your mind. And if we can look at it differently and think about it as just a moment where you sit still, that
Mm.
changes everything. I think when our brains get really loud as we meditate, it's because these are all things that your brain is trying to communicate to you and you're not paying attention. It could
Right.
be something as simple or benign as pick up bananas at the grocery store. Don't forget. It could be you need to make sure to send that email in the morning. It could be something heavier, like when you were in eighth grade, you never should have raised your hand to speak about this topic. And it's weird when stuff like that comes through. What I recommend for people is to let the thoughts come. And if there's a lot of them and they keep coming up over and over again, keeping a pen and paper close by, just somewhere to write things down. I do this for myself.
Yeah.
And as they come up during your meditation, just jot them down. Just get them out of your head and place them somewhere. And over time, if you were to do this for, say, 2 to 5 minutes a day for a month, eventually you're going to get to a point where your brain starts to shut up a little bit because it doesn't need to keep bombarding you with things. As
Right.
that happens, you can start using your intuition and ask yourself some questions.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
you might ask yourself, like, why is it that I'm so triggered by people who are controlling? And then see what
Mm.
comes up and let that be your line of questioning. Start asking yourself things that open you up for more introspection. And you can choose things randomly. You could look up prompts online. I have a shadow work journal called the Shadow Seekers
Ooh.
Journal that we talked about
Oh,
before.
yeah. Wow.
There's 80 prompts in here. You could use them to guide you, but it doesn't have to be something that you feel like you can't access. When your mind eventually does start to get quiet and you have the space to start to have this Q&A session with your own psyche, the unconscious is just going to open itself up to you and the answers will come immediately. And it's very similar to listening to your higher self or your intuition, where
Mhm.
it doesn't feel emotionally charged.
Yeah.
You'll ask a question. Like I'm just going to pull open a random page here. So the question is, what is the first time you remember being frightened by your biggest fear? And very emotionless, the answer might be something like mirrors. And that's going to confuse you because you're like, okay, why? And you can have a question back and forth. Why would mirrors scare me? And you might remember at 4 years old looking in the mirror and seeing a shadow, and it just caught you off guard enough.
Mm.
And when that happened, your body switched into fight or flight. And now we have that subconscious feedback loop of every time you look in the mirror, that experience is going to trigger the release of chemicals, the emotions of fear, and a little bit of sadness, maybe. That'll send adrenaline and cortisol down to the body to switch you into fight or flight. And the thought that comes back up is, I'm afraid mirrors are bad. And now we have a
Mhm.
fear develop out of nowhere and
Yeah.
it expands and grows over time. So you can do this on your own by allowing yourself the space to just ask the questions. And it
Mm.
really is that simple.
Wow. Wow. That does sound simple, and it's nice that you have that journal with the prompts. That's really great. A question that comes up for me is, it sounds like somebody could engage with that journal or engage with themselves with those questions and they could get some really deep insights. But what if somebody starts to get some insights from their unconscious mind, from their intuition, whatever you want to call it, and it starts to feel overwhelming to them?
Yeah.
When should somebody who's doing some shadow work by themselves realize that, you know what, it's probably time to reach out to a qualified professional like a therapist who can help me? Um, process through these things because I've hit a point where I can't do it anymore on my own.
Yeah. Well, first, let me say that as you're going through it, something I should have mentioned before, and a really good point that you bring up, is the most important thing for us as we're doing any kind of shadow work is to interrupt that feedback loop. And the
Mhm.
way that I find that it's easiest to do that when you're doing it on your own is with your breath. If you
Mm,
can change the way that you're breathing, you can change the way that you experience anything that's happened to you before. Because when we're activated, we're in that fight or flight situation, your breath is really shallow. With the fight or flight response, there's two aspects of it. This is the autonomic nervous system. So there's either the sympathetic, which is fight or flight, or the parasympathetic, which is
mhm.
rest and digest. When we're in fight or flight, our breathing is really shallow. When we're in rest and digest, our breathing is very relaxed and calm. Like everybody listening to this right now, I hope that you're in that rest and digest space, just listening,
Yeah.
integrating, letting all of this seep in somewhere. You can't be in both. The autonomic nervous system is like a light switch. It's either on or it's off. So if you can really hold the breath and make sure that your breathing stays deep and really even, just
Yeah.
in through the nose and out through the mouth the whole time, you can't switch into fight or flight. Now, the point that you should work with a professional is if you can't hold that breath pattern, if you
Mm,
can't keep yourself regulated, if you can't keep that breath pattern of in through the nose and out through the mouth and really long breaths, that's when you should work with somebody because whatever it is that you're tapping into is maybe a bit too large for you to handle on your own. And the person that I would recommend working with for this is someone who specializes in shadow work, who has that trauma informed background. So either
mm,
a licensed psychotherapist or someone who holds a certification that includes trauma training, because
mm.
whatever it is that you're experiencing needs the care of someone who understands how to process the trauma, but also help you access that unconscious memory. Both
Mm.
need to be there for you to get to it.
Wow, that's really helpful. And I think that is kind of a tangible thing that people can measure, because I think that's a big question for people, whether they're doing shadow work or just whether triggers are coming up in general. When you're at a point where you can't regulate your body in a healthy way on your own, it is really time to reach out to somebody who can support you in that. And there's no shame in that. Sometimes our emotions, sometimes our traumas are just too big for us to carry by ourselves. And there is absolutely no shame in getting support. In fact, can be a really brave and heroic thing to do.
It's something
Uh,
I think everybody should because I don't think any one of us can handle everything that we go through. The human
yeah,
experience is wild, isn't it? And I think if people are listening to this podcast, they probably know that better than most.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, what are some of the encouragements that you might give to somebody who is on their shadow work journey or thinking about starting it? If you could just give them a few words of encouragement about this, because it can feel a little bit daunting. Maybe they're listening and they're like, "Oh, this is something I feel like I should do, but I'm a little bit scared." What are just some words of encouragement for people in that place?
Yeah, I've been there before. I know how scary it can be to either be at the beginning or starting on a journey like this. But know that when you do shadow work, you're actually going to move through it very quickly. So you don't have to stay in that spot for very long. You're going to
Mm,
get through this and you're going to get through it and feel so much better about yourself, emotionally, about your life in such a short amount of time. Keep hanging on there and don't forget that you have resources. There are people who can help you. There's books you can read, there's podcasts you can listen
mm.
to, there's meditations you can try. There's always something to help you.
Wow, thank you for that. Well, I want to start wrapping things up, but a question I love to ask our guests is, what is one of the best pieces of advice you've ever received? Because it sounds like you've received a lot of training, you've had a lot of experiences, and so what is one of the best pieces of advice that you've been given?
Yeah. When I was young, just a little backstory on this. My dad is a plumber
Okay.
and he owns a plumbing business in Manhattan. He started from nothing, very, very poor. His family was immigrants and he had nothing growing up, absolutely nothing. And one of the things he instilled in me from the time that I was very young is that you'll never know anything. You're always going to be learning. There's always more, and the
Mm.
information that you have is probably already outdated. So never ever get to the point where you feel like there's a wall up in front of you. You can always learn more and break through it. Just keep learning, keep going. And that's the best advice I've ever received. And I always share that with other people. Keep learning. Don't feel like you've ever got all the information because you don't.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That is so true. That is great, great advice. Thank you for that. Now, where can everybody find you online? Tell us a bit about your books and the book that's coming out soon. Just tell us all the things.
So on social media and my website, it's all the same. It's IAM, like I am, Danielle Massi. So I'm daniellemassey.com. I am Danielle Massi on Instagram. I am Danielle Massi on TikTok, which is where I have my biggest following. I put so much stuff on there. Got a YouTube channel under the same name. Everything's linked back to my website. So if you get to my website, you'll be able to find everything else. When it comes to my books, I have the Shadow Seekers Journal that's already available on Amazon. That's the one that you can use to start doing some of this work on your own. It's called the Shadow Seekers Journal when you type it in there, or if you type my name, it'll pop right up. And then this September, I have a new book coming out with Union Square and Co., a publishing house that's connected to Barnes and Noble, called Shadow Work. I'm so excited for everybody to get their hands on this book because it teaches this practice as simply and beautifully as I could put it into words. It's a practice that's deep. Obviously, there's a huge scientific component and a spiritual component of learning how to tap into your psychic gifts and learning how to trust yourself. And everything is broken down in there. There's exercises and meditations you can try for yourself, and all of my stories that I infuse into the book. So I'm just really proud of it and excited for everyone to receive it.
Thank you so much, Danielle. It has been great having you on the show. I've learned so much, and I know our listeners and watchers have as well. Yeah, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, and everybody, feel free to pop on over to our social media as well. Make sure that you check out Danielle's and follow her in all the places. But you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And of course, this show is every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern. So you can watch future shows that are coming up for season 3. And we have a huge backlog from the last 2 seasons of Courage Conversations. And you can just go to our website, courage365.org, click on the videos tab, and you'll be able to catch all of the back episodes. We have a couple of other things that I'd love to offer you for free as well. So number 1 is our free ebook, 5 Keys to Living a Life of Courage. You can find that again on our website, courage365.org. This is an ebook to help you take your next most courageous steps in your healing journey. Other things to let you know about is we have our monthly peer support groups. These are online support groups for adult survivors of abuse. We go over a topic every month and really just get in and discuss the issues that are related to survivors. It's a great place to find community with other survivors so you don't have to feel alone. These are called Courage Clubs. You can also find those on our website at courage365.org. Just click on the Courage Clubs tab and you can sign up there to be put on our email list so you know when our next meeting is. And then last but not least, are you on our text message list? Because if not, you are missing out. On our text message list, we send text messages every morning, Monday through Friday, totally free. These are encouraging messages created by survivors for survivors, and we have a very active text community. All you have to do to sign up for that, and get ready, pull out your phones. All you have to do is type the word courage and send that to 1-917-809-7311. So type the word courage and then send it to our text message list. It is 1-917-809-7311. And when you send that message, that will sign you up on the list and you'll begin receiving those daily inspirational text messages. Thank you all so much for tuning into the show. We cannot wait to see you next week, and live with courage.